So hi everybody, thank you Yuval for the intro. I'm Noam, and what we're going to do today is use these 15 minutes to take a front-end app and make it into a full-stack app. A little bit about me, I've been working for over 20 years in enterprise application environments. I've been part of hundreds of projects in applications that serves enterprises such as CRM, ERP, finance, banking, insurance. These applications some of them are internal applications, some of them are external applications, all have hundreds of tables and thousands of forms, and you kind of see a pattern go through them. I think a good name for them would be a CRUD application. So if we're looking to write CRUD applications, this is a list of what I think we should have. So we need to have a backend and a front end. We need to have model types on the backend and some kind of model types on the front end. We need to have API routes, put, post, delete, and we need to have some code that consumes that using fetch or Axios or anything else you like, or Polo Client. And we need to validate the data that comes into our API, and we also need to validate the inputs that our users are putting on the form. We need to control who can get what data on the backend and the same on the front end. And then there's ORM and paging and real-time and routes and components. That's it. That's what you need to write a modern CRUD application. Sounds familiar? Cool. So the way I look at it, this part of the code is just unwarranted separation of concerns, which means it's a boilerplate code that is a mirror image of one another. It's like a socket and a plug. And myself as an error-prone developer often gets this wrong, which means I'll fix one of them and not consistently fix the others and find the bugs in production. Also, if you look at paging, sorting, all of that stuff is boilerplate code that is repetitive, and I really don't like boilerplate code. Now, in recent years, full-stack frameworks such as Next or Nuxt and all the others have started working on it with TRPC and giving us model types that are shared and routes that are shared, which is a great start, but I think we can do better than that. The way I see it, all of these items are a reflection of a business entity. It can be a customer, it can be an order, and all of these are just different views on that business entity. So I want to have that business entity as my single source of truth and take it from there. So I wrote a package called Dreamalt, and I'm going to show it to you today. So this is what I planned for the rest of the demo. This is a live coding demo for those who missed that part. And we're going to take a front-end app and turn it into a full-stack app with all of these functionalities. So I have, enough time. So here is VS Code, and I'm going to use Vite. Vite, does everybody know what Vite is? Okay, perfect. So Vite gives me hot reload in the browser and allows me to have a nice experience here. And this is the React app we're going to work with today. Let's review the code. So over here I have a backend and a front end. And in the front end I have a to-do component. We have the task state over here. Currently the state is in the front end. That's what part of the things we're going to work on. We have code to add a new task, which serves this part of the screen. And we have the form, again this part, and the list of tasks. Pretty basic React app, right? Cool. On the back end, we have a standard Node.js server. I'm using Express over here. I've configured some simple cookie session authentication to demo it later. And we've configured Dreamalt over here to use Postgres and to get the user from our auth info. Now in development, we use Vite to reload our Node.js server as well. And when we'll deploy the app, we'll use this Node.js server to return the React files. Cool. So after we review the landscape, let's head into the code. The way I look at it, this application has the task class as the basic entity for it. That's the business entity. And I want it to be the single source of truth for my APIs, for my database, for my front-end query language. So to do that, I'm going to add here the entity decorator. And I'm going to ask it to allow all CRUD capabilities. Later, I'll restrict that. And I'll tell it the ID field is a CUID. The title is a string. The completed is a Boolean, and the created at, surprisingly enough, is created at. And then I'll head back to our Express server, and I'll register the entity in the entities array. And that's it. That's what I needed to do to get a fully working API. Let's check it out. So here I'm running a GET request, and I'm getting all the data that I currently have in my database. And I'm going to do a POST request and put some text here. And we can see that the data was posted to the server. We got the CUID, we got the created at. So we have a fully functional API just with these few decorators. Now let's go ahead and hijack the to-dos from the front end because I'm really too lazy to type. And I'll put them here. And now all of them were posted into our database. Great. Now let's go ahead and reuse the same definitions on our front end. So we're going to head out to our to-do component. And the first thing I'll do is define a repository, which is remalt repo of task. And then I'll add a use effect. And say task repo.find, then set tasks. And that's it. It goes and gets the task from the backend. Now, if you examine the network tab, okay, there's no black magic over here, just REST API calls. Simple REST API calls that go and get the data from the backend. Now, obviously find by default gets all the rows, but that's not really useful. So let's go ahead and configure it a little bit. I can say, for example, limit 2 to get the first 2 rows from the database, page 2. So I get server-side paging out of the box without having to do any work for it. I can add order by, created at, descending, or ascending. And it's all just REST API calls, standard REST API calls that everyone can understand. I can also add filtering, if I type it correctly. True will filter on the backend only to give me the completed tasks, or false only to give me the uncompleted tasks. And note that it's fully typed, which means if I put a string over here, I'll get a typing error. And it's not code generation, it's not configuration files, it's just types, basic TypeScript types that are shared between the front end and the back end. And of course, if I do undefined, it doesn't filter at all. Great, so we've covered the find. Now let's go ahead and implement the other letters of the CRUD acronym. So let's save, or let's insert new tasks. So I've added this over here, and I can actually delete all of those because the backend does that. Let's save changes to existing tasks. So whenever someone sets completed, I'll do task repo save. And whenever someone deletes, I'll do await task repo delete. And that's it. That's all I need to get the full CRUD capabilities. So I can add a new task. We can see a post call on the network tab. I can check it, and we can see a put call for the update. And I can delete it, and we can see a delete call to the backend that deletes my data. So again, just a few decorators, and I have a end-to-end typing, CRUD, query language, just by, all of those are reflected by that single entity. Great, so now our users like our application so much that they went and gave it to another user. And that user opened the browser and start making changes. And user number 1 looks at these changes and doesn't see them. Okay, now of course we know that he forgot to refresh, but users want more these days. They want it to automatically reflect, the data changes should reflect to all of the users at the same time. And let me show you how easy it is to do it with remalt. So instead of find, I'm going to use live query. Instead of then, I'm going to use subscribe. And subscribe gets an info object that I can use to apply the changes on our array. And of course, I'll return it because I want it to unsubscribe when the component unmounts. And now, I have 2 users, and the changes are reflected across all users. Cool. So we've done setup, entity, paging, CRUD, live query. Next, let's talk about validation. Validation is one of those concerns that often gets done wrong. I'll fix the validation on the front end and forget to fix it on the back end, just like my bank website, for example. And this is one of the things that it's hard to get consistent. Now, I want it to be in my single source of truth. So let's head over to our task.ts and add over here validation logic. If task title length is less than 3, throw arrow to short. Okay, and I've defined the validation here. And if I try to add a new task, I will get a too short error. But notice the network tab, there's no network calls being made. This is front-end validation. Okay, let's bypass that and send an API call. And I get the same validation code also protecting my API. So I can get a consistent validation code end to end. And the last thing I want to show you in terms of functionality is authentication and authorization. This is again one of those concerns that it's hard to get consistent across the front end and the back end, and one of those concerns that I would like to have in my single source of truth. So let's head over to our task, and I'll change that API CRUD is only allowed for authenticated users. And as soon as I do that, I cannot see the data because I'm not authenticated. So I get a forbidden error. Let's sign in as Steve. And now I can see the data. Okay? But there's more to it, not just can see or can't see. You can do more fine-grained control. So for example, I can say that delete is not allowed, and that insert is only allowed if you're an admin. And as soon as I do that, Steve cannot add a new task. He will get a forbidden error. Now let's head over to our Auth, okay, and nominate Jane as an admin. So I'm going to go here, say roles, admin, sign out, sign in as Jane, and now Jane can give remalt a star. Jane can add a task, okay? But if you go back to Steve and review his user experience, it's not ideal that he's getting an error. I think it's better that he won't even see the option to add. And I want to tie it to my single source of truth. I don't want to define duplicate rules across my code. So let's head over to the UI, and I'm going to highlight the form, and I'm going to say here, task repo, metadata, allow API insert. So only if insert is allowed, Steve will see the form, okay? And it's so tightly bound to the definition, so if I comment this out, Steve will see the form, and if I comment this in, Steve will not see the form. Cool. So I've done everything that I planned to do, but now I'm a little bit ambitious. Let's try to deploy this. Let's see if I'm lucky enough. So I'm going to use Railway. So I'm going to say Railway open, and Railway will open a project that I've prepared for this. And then I'll say Railway app and do some explanations. So we can see here that I've defined a Postgres database and the environment that I'm going to deploy to. And when I hit Railway app, Railway will upload my source code to the backend, run npm i, npm build, and npm start. While it's doing that, let's go back to our slides and make good use of our time. So remalt fits within your existing stack. You don't have to go all in or remalt and drop everything that you're doing right now. You can simply add it to any projects that you're doing. You can use it with any front-end framework, any back-end framework. You can use Express or Fastify or Nest or whatever you like. It can run on most databases, and it will run on all Node.js environments. So you can run it in Lambda or Vercel or Heroku or pretty much anywhere. Now there's a lot more to remalt that I didn't have a chance to talk about right here. From the same entities, we can derive GraphQL without any work, or OpenAPI. There's lifecycle hooks and many, many more things. If you don't like decorators, that's okay. You can use it without decorators. If you don't like TypeScript, that's a little sad, but also okay, so you can use it with plain JS. And I invite you all to visit our website, remalt.dev, where you will find tutorials about how to do everything that I've done just now in about an hour or a little bit more. We have tutorials on React, Angular, Vue, and Next. And before I'm done, I want to check my deployment. And hopefully, if the gods of deployment were nice to me, I'll click here and we'll get our website deployed. Let's sign in as Jane. Jane. Yes, I love late Jane. And Jane going to give us a task. Give remalt a star. Great. And now I want you guys to help me. So I'm going to create a QR code here. And I'm going to ask you to take out your camera, sign in to our tasks, and sign in as Jane. Don't forget, she's important. And see what we get. Let's see if the live query works for you as well. Yay, okay, cool. Thank you.